That night is still burned into my head like a meme I can't get rid of, the kind of thing people would clown on TikTok if they saw it happen to someone else, except this time it was me, and it wasn't funny at all. It was the exact moment everything I thought I knew about my relationship shattered into little pieces. Because what kind of girlfriend picks up her boyfriend from work and then puts another dude in the front passenger seat like it's the most natural thing in the world, like I was supposed to sit in the back of my own ride like some Uber customer, like my 4 years with her didn't mean anything compared to some guy she happened to call coworker. And yeah, I know some people will say it's petty, that it's just a seat, that I overreacted, but for me it wasn't about the seat, it was about respect, it was about boundaries, it was about that line you don't cross if you actually value the person you're with. And in that second when I opened the car door and saw Jason Turner sitting there all comfortable with his seatbelt clicked and his smug little smile like he belonged, I swear something in me just snapped, like I saw the whole future playing out and I didn't want any part of it, so I didn't yell, I didn't cause a scene in front of him, I just slid into the back like I was invisible, and my girlfriend, well, my ex now Emily Parker glanced at me through the rearview mirror with that fake casual look she does when she knows she's pushing her luck, and she said something like, "Hey babe, Jason needed a ride, hope you don't mind," and I didn't answer, I just stared out the window while my blood boiled because yeah, I minded a lot, I minded so much that the second I got home I packed my essentials, grabbed Max our dog, who honestly felt more like mine at that point and walked out, but before that I sent her one message, not a paragraph, not an essay, just a single text, "We're done." And that was it, I didn't wait for her reply, I didn't explain. Because what explanation could possibly make it okay, what kind of test was she running, was I supposed to just shrug and laugh it off, be the chill boyfriend who lets his girl blur the lines until she forgets the lines even exist? No, that's not me, and I know the comments section in my head was already divided, half the people would say, "Bro you're dramatic, it's just a seat," and the other half would be like, "Nah he's right. If she really respected him she'd know, but it doesn't matter." Because I was the one living it, not them, I was the one feeling like a clown in the back seat while Jason sat there in my spot, and that feeling, that humiliation, that tiny spark of rage, it was enough to burn down 4 years of history in an instant, and maybe that sounds reckless, maybe that sounds like I threw away something good over nothing, but to me it wasn't nothing, it was everything, it was a sign, a red flag waving right in my face, and if I ignored it then what would be next? Letting her go on late-night work trips with Jason, letting her text him goodnight while I was lying next to her, letting myself rot in quiet resentment because I didn't speak up the first time. No, better to cut it clean, better to hurt now than to bleed slowly later. So yeah, I left, I walked out with Max in a duffel bag, and I swear even Max knew something was wrong because he kept looking at me with those big sad eyes. But dogs are loyal, way more loyal than people sometimes, and he didn't fight me when I clipped on his leash and said we were going, he just followed, and in that moment I realized he was the only one I could trust not to switch sides, not to make me feel like a fool, and yeah maybe that sounds dramatic but heartbreak has a way of making even small things feel epic, like the world is ending just because your personal world cracked, and that's what I felt, the end of a world I'd built with Emily. A world I thought was solid until one front seat moment proved it was made of glass, and the craziest part is I didn't cry, not that night, not even the next morning, I just felt this cold clarity, like I'd been carrying a weight for years without realizing it, and now it was gone, and I could breathe again, and maybe that's what scared Emily the most because when she finally saw my text and started blowing up my phone with, "Wait what happened, babe please talk to me, don't do this," I didn't answer, I didn't even open them, I just let them pile up like unread notifications I didn't care about. And I know she wasn't used to that, she was used to me folding, to me forgiving, but not this time, not over this, and yeah, I knew it wasn't the end of the story, I knew she'd try to talk her way back in, but right then in that moment, it was over for me, and I was already bracing myself for the storm that was coming, because walking away is never clean, it always drags drama behind it, and trust me, the drama was just getting started. People kept asking me afterward why I threw away 4 years over something so small, why I nuked the whole relationship over a front seat, and the more I heard it the more I realized how different people's thresholds are, because for me that seat wasn't just a seat, it was a symbol, it was like a pop quiz on respect, and she failed it in the worst way, and I wasn't about to sit around waiting for the final exam, I knew some people thought I was too harsh. Even my best friend Chris at first was like, bro, maybe she just wasn't thinking, maybe she was tired, maybe Jason just jumped in, and I get it, on paper it sounds like a dumb hill to die on, but what everyone doesn't see is how many little things add up over years, how many tiny compromises stack until one day you wake up and you're not even you anymore, you're just this watered-down version of yourself trying not to rock the boat, and I swear that night in the car was like someone hit me with a bucket of cold water. Like I saw the ghost of married Ryan 10 years from now, sitting in the back of his own life while someone else rode shotgun, and nah, I wasn't letting that be me, and when people called it an experiment, or a test, like she was trying to see how much I'd take, that made me even angrier, because who the hell tests the person they claim they want to marry? Love isn't a multiple-choice quiz, you don't hand out trick questions and laugh when the other person answers wrong. But deep down I think that's exactly what it was, she wanted to see if I'd swallow it, if I'd shrug and play the easygoing boyfriend, but the truth is I'm not that guy, I'd rather break everything than let someone play with my dignity, and that's what I told Chris when we sat in his garage a couple days later, beers in hand, him giving me that look like he wanted to understand but couldn't fully get it, and I told him straight, if I give up respect for myself, then what the hell do I have left to give anyone else? And he didn't say much after that, he just nodded, because he knew there wasn't a comeback, because at the end of the day people can debate love languages and second chances all they want, but respect is either there or it's not, and once it's gone it doesn't come back, and I wasn't waiting around for apologies or explanations, I already knew where this was heading, and that's why when Emily kept spamming me with messages like, please let me explain, you're overreacting, Jason is just a friend, you're the one I want, I didn't answer, because what was there to explain? She showed me who she was, and I believed her. But the crazy part was I knew this wasn't over, I knew she wasn't going to just vanish, because that's not who she is. Emily doesn't lose gracefully, she fights, she manipulates, she spins the narrative until she looks like the victim, and sure enough I started seeing these sad little posts on her Instagram story, pictures of sunsets with captions like, sometimes the ones you love the most hurt you the deepest, or a selfie of her with red eyes like she'd been crying. And all the comments from her friends were like, stay strong queen, he doesn't deserve you, and it made me laugh, not because heartbreak is funny but because I knew exactly how she played this game, painting me as the villain so she could collect sympathy, while I stayed quiet because I didn't feel like airing dirty laundry. But man did it sting watching people who'd sat at our dinner table act like I was some heartless monster, like they forgot the years I was there showing up for her, but that's the cost of walking away, you don't just lose the person, you lose the world that came with them, and honestly I was okay with that, because what I gained was clarity, and once you've tasted that, you don't trade it back for comfort, no matter how lonely it gets, and yeah, it did get lonely, don't get me wrong, nights felt weird, mornings felt hollow. Max kept tilting his head at me like he was asking where she went, but I kept telling myself I'd rather sit alone with my dog and my pride intact than sit next to someone who thought so little of me she could throw me in the back seat without blinking. And that's how I knew I'd made the right call, because even with the silence, even with the guilt trips and the smear campaign, I didn't regret it, not for a second, because regret only comes when you're unsure, and I was dead sure, and maybe that's why I didn't break when the next wave hit. Because trust me, the front seat thing was only the beginning, the real proof of what she was about to become came when I walked back into that apartment to grab the rest of my stuff and found Jason Turner there like he already lived there, and that, my friends, is where the story really gets messy. When I walked back into that apartment to grab the rest of my stuff I expected awkward silence, maybe some half-hearted attempt from Emily to patch things up, maybe even tears, but what I didn't expect was to see Jason freaking Turner standing there like he owned the place, barefoot in the kitchen wearing one of her hoodies, stirring something on the stove like he was playing house. And the sight hit me like a punch to the gut because I realized in that moment that the respect I thought I lost in the car was already long gone before that, it was already being handed over piece by piece to this guy, and maybe I was late to the party, maybe the front seat wasn't the first test but the last straw, and standing there with my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, Max pulling gently on the leash like he could sense the tension, I froze, not because I wanted her back, but because I couldn't believe how fast she'd moved on. Or maybe it wasn't fast at all, maybe it was happening all along, and that's the thought that made me laugh. Not a happy laugh, more like one of those bitter chuckles you let out when life proves you right in the worst way, and Emily came rushing out of the bedroom with that panicked look, like she hadn't expected me to actually show up at that exact time, like she'd been hoping to stage manage the whole thing, and she stammered some excuse about how Jason was just helping out, how she hadn't been sleeping well, how he was being supportive, and I just shook my head because there's only so many times a person can insult your intelligence before it becomes comedy, and Jason, to his credit, didn't back down. He gave me that half smile like he was daring me to say something, and maybe the old me would have thrown hands right there, maybe I would have let anger run wild, but the new me, the one who already knew it was over, just looked him dead in the eye and said, "Relax, man. I'm just here to get my stuff, you can keep the hoodie," and I swear the silence that followed was louder than shouting, because Emily flinched like I'd slapped her, and Jason suddenly found the pot on the stove very interesting, and I went about my business, grabbing boxes, clearing shelves, emptying drawers. Each item I packed felt like erasing myself from a life I no longer wanted, like I was ghosting in real time, and yeah, it hurt. I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting watching my toothbrush next to his, my hoodie crumpled on the couch where he'd probably sat, my mug shoved to the back of the cabinet, but that pain was fuel. Every little cut reminded me why I was right to walk, because staying would have meant bleeding out slowly, and I wasn't about to die that way, so I took what was mine, left what wasn't worth fighting over, and when I clipped Max's leash again and headed for the door, Emily tried one last time. She grabbed my arm and whispered, "Please, don't do this. He doesn't mean anything." "You mean everything, I just needed support," and I turned to her. And I don't know where the words came from, but I said, "If I meant everything, you wouldn't have made me feel like nothing," and her hand slipped off my arm like she'd been burned, and I walked out without looking back, because if you look back you start doubting, you start second-guessing, and I couldn't afford that, not when I'd already seen the truth with my own eyes, and the truth was standing barefoot in my kitchen making eggs in my girlfriend's hoodie. So yeah, I left, and on the way down the stairs I felt this weird calm, like I'd just finished ripping off a band-aid that had been glued to my skin for too long, painful but freeing, and I thought maybe that was the end, maybe I could finally move on, but of course life doesn't let you exit stage left so cleanly, because the minute Emily realized she couldn't guilt me into staying, she switched tactics. She went public, full broadcast mode, posting vague breakup TikToks, sad Spotify playlists, even tagging me in some cryptic quote about men who don't know how to fight for love, and suddenly my phone was blowing up again, not from her this time but from people in our circle, mutual friends, co-workers, even distant acquaintances asking, "Bro, what happened? Why is Emily saying you abandoned her? Why is Jason always around her now?" And I wanted to ignore it but I couldn't fully, because that's the curse of social media. Your private life becomes community property, and everyone thinks they're entitled to an opinion, so I finally snapped and hit unfollow, unfriend, delete, block, wiped her from my feeds like she was malware, because that's what it felt like she was infecting every corner of my life with her narrative, and still she found ways to get through, burner numbers, mutual contacts, even emails, long paragraphs trying to explain, to justify, to rewrite what I'd seen with my own eyes, and the worst part is some nights I almost answered, almost let curiosity trick me into giving her the stage again, but every time I felt weak Max would curl up against me and remind me that I wasn't alone, that loyalty still existed, even if it came with 4 legs and a wagging tail, and that was enough to keep me grounded, enough to keep me from slipping back into a cycle I knew would break me again. And Chris, being the friend he is, backed me up, told me I did the right thing, even when he admitted he thought the seat thing was small. After hearing about Jason in the apartment he shut up about that real quick, and he said, "Man, you dodged a bullet," and I agreed, even though part of me still hurt, because dodging a bullet doesn't mean you don't feel the wind when it passes, and the truth is the next chapter of my life was already waiting. I just didn't know it yet, and it didn't come in the form of closure or revenge. It came in the form of a girl I met by accident in a bar, a girl who would flip my world upside down in ways I wasn't ready for. And her name was Sarah Miller. Meeting Sarah Miller was like the universe trolling me, like fate said, "Hey Ryan, you've been through hell, let's throw you a curveball and see how you handle it." And it happened on one of those nights when I swore I wasn't even gonna go out. Chris had to drag me to the rusty anchor, said I'd been moping too long, that I needed to be around people instead of just me, my dog, and Netflix, so I went, reluctantly, figuring I'd nurse a drink and dip early. But that's not how it went down, because somewhere between my second whiskey and Chris trying to teach some stranger darts, this group of girls comes in, loud, laughing, the kind of energy that fills a room, and one of them, this petite brunette with sharp eyes and a smirk like she already knew the ending to every joke, zeroed in on me like I had a target painted on my back, and before I even processed what was happening she was standing at my table with a beer in her hand saying, "Truth or dare?" And I laughed because what grown adult walks up to a stranger and hits them with a game you haven't played since middle school? But she didn't flinch, she just raised an eyebrow like she dared me to call her bluff, so I said, "Dare," and she grinned like a wolf and slid a napkin across the table with her number written on it, and I realized she wasn't asking, she was declaring, she was basically saying, "You're mine now," and part of me wanted to roll my eyes and ignore it, because the timing was all wrong, because my chest was still bruised from Emily. Because the last thing I needed was another girl with games, but another part of me, the reckless part that hated feeling like life was on pause, wanted to see where this went, so I pocketed the napkin and told her my name, and she said hers Sarah Miller, and just like that, a new chapter began whether I liked it or not, because Sarah wasn't the type to fade into the background. She was the kind who blew into your life like a storm and rearranged the furniture before you even noticed the windows were open, and over the next few weeks she kept showing up, texting me first, sending memes, inviting me to random coffee spots or late-night drives, and every time I told myself I'd keep it casual, that I wouldn't catch feelings, but then she'd do something small, like bring Max treats without me asking, or remember exactly how I took my coffee, or show up with tickets to a game I casually mentioned once, and those walls I'd built after Emily started to crack, little by little. And don't get me wrong, Sarah wasn't perfect, she was bold too. The point of reckless, she'd drag me into karaoke nights and make me sing even though I couldn't carry a tune, she'd post us on her story before I even knew if I wanted to be us. She was fast, faster than I was ready for, but damn if it didn't feel good to be wanted that hard, to be chosen without hesitation, to feel like I was the front seat again instead of the afterthought in the back, and I knew people would judge. That they'd say I was rebounding, that I was moving on too quick, but the truth is I didn't care, because when Sarah was around the noise in my head quieted, and for a guy like me that meant everything, so I let it happen, I let her in, I let myself feel again, even though part of me whispered that it was a mistake, that maybe she was another storm disguised as sunshine, but at that point I figured maybe storms weren't so bad if they reminded you you were still alive. And looking back now I realize Sarah was exactly the opposite of Emily in every way, where Emily tested me, Sarah cheered for me, where Emily made me feel like I had to earn a spot in her life, Sarah shoved me into the spotlight whether I wanted it or not, and for a while that contrast was addictive, like going from drought to flood, you drink it up even if it drowns you, and that's what was happening. I was drowning in her, willingly, but if there's one thing I should have known it's that nothing that burns that bright lasts forever. And as much as I wanted to believe Sarah was the happy ending to the mess Emily left behind, the truth was she came with her own chaos, her own sharp edges, and eventually those edges would cut too, and I should have seen it coming that night in the bar when Emily and Sarah's worlds collided, when past and present clashed in the ugliest way possible, but at the time I was too caught up in Sarah's orbit to notice the warning signs, and that, my friends. The night everything blew up started like any other Friday with Chris dragging me out to the Rusty Anchor because apparently I'd become too domestic, hanging out with Sarah and Max all the time, and he wanted to see if I still knew how to have fun without a leash in my hand, so I went, figuring it'd be another night of darts, cheap whiskey, maybe Sarah showing up later with her friends, nothing dramatic, but of course life loves to prove me wrong, because halfway through my second drink I felt the air shift. That weird tension you can sense before you even see the reason, and then I spotted her, Emily, walking in like she owned the place, all dolled up in that way she used to do when she wanted attention, and I swear my chest tightened not because I missed her but because the last thing I needed was past and present colliding in public, but fate wasn't giving me a choice because 5 minutes later Sarah came bursting through the door with her crew, already laughing, already loud, and when her eyes landed on me she lit up like always and ran over, kissed me in front of everyone. And that's when Emily saw us, and I swear I could feel the temperature drop 10 degrees, because Emily froze, then smirked like she'd been waiting for this showdown, and of course Sarah noticed, she noticed everything, and she leaned in and whispered, "Who's that?" and before I could even form a sentence Emily was already strutting over like she'd rehearsed the scene in her head 100 times, and she said, "Wow, Ryan, you moved on quick." Loud enough for half the bar to hear, and Sarah turned to her with that dangerous little smile. The one that meant she wasn't backing down, and said, "Yeah, he did, and clearly upgraded," and just like that the fuse was lit, and I was the idiot standing in the middle holding the matchbook, trying to defuse 2 bombs that had no interest in peace talks, because Emily laughed, one of those bitter laughs that hides venom, and said, "Funny, he used to tell me I was the best thing that ever happened to him," and Sarah shot back, "And then he realized better things exist," and the crowd was eating it up like it was free cable drama, phones already out, Snapchat stories going live, and I wanted to disappear but instead I grabbed Sarah's arm, tried to pull her back, whispered, "Don't, it's not worth it," but Sarah yanked away and stepped closer, practically nose to nose with Emily, and said, "He's with me now, so get over it," and Emily, instead of walking away, shoved her shoulder. Not hard enough to knock her down but hard enough to make it clear this wasn't just words anymore, and before I could react Sarah shoved back twice as hard, and suddenly the bar was split between "twos" and "oh shits" and Chris trying to play peacemaker while I stood there realizing my life had turned into some trashy reality show, and the worst part is for a second I just froze, because part of me wanted them both to stop but another part of me, the raw ego-driven part, felt weirdly validated that 2 women were fighting over me. Which is pathetic but real, and then things escalated because Emily grabbed Sarah's wrist and Sarah didn't hesitate, she threw her beer right in Emily's face, foam dripping down her hair and makeup, and the crowd lost their minds, and I snapped out of my ego trip, furious, not at Emily but at Sarah, because no matter what history I had with Emily, humiliating her like that was crossing a line, so I did the only thing I could think of, I grabbed my beer and tossed it on Sarah, not to hurt her but to make a point, to shock her into realizing she wasn't untouchable, and the silence that followed was the kind you only get after a gunshot, everyone just staring like I'd grown a second head, Sarah frozen with betrayal written all over her face, Emily wiping her eyes, Chris whispering, "Bro, what the hell did you just do?" and me standing there thinking maybe I'd finally lost it, maybe all the anger and heartbreak had boiled over in the worst way, because I looked Sarah in the eye and said, "We're done, I don't want either of you," and walked out. With Max's leash in my hand like I was leaving a crime scene, phones flashing behind me, my name already trending in that tiny local way gossip spreads, and the ride home felt like the longest drive of my life, because I wasn't proud, I wasn't triumphant, I just felt empty, like I'd burned down 2 bridges and was stranded on an island with nothing but smoke, and sure enough my phone blew up the next day, Sarah demanding answers, Emily posting cryptic Instagram stories, friends asking if I'd really dumped them both in front of everyone, and I ignored it all, I shut down, focused on work, on Max, on breathing, because I realized maybe I wasn't ready for anyone, maybe I jumped from one mess into another without ever healing, and that was on me, not them, and over the next few weeks Sarah stopped calling, Emily stopped posting, the storm passed but the wreckage stayed, and that's when something unexpected happened, because while I was busy trying to ghost the world wasn't done with me, and an opportunity landed in my lap that would change everything again, one that had nothing to do with Emily or Sarah but would still tie them back into my story in ways I didn't see coming. After the chaos at the Rusty Anchor I thought I'd reached the lowest point, like there was no coming back from dumping 2 women in front of half the city with beers flying and phones recording, but funny thing about hitting rock bottom is sometimes it gives you the clarity you should have had all along, and for me that clarity came in the weeks that followed, when I shut out the noise, muted the group chats, ignored the DMs, let Sarah's furious texts rot in my inbox and scrolled past Emily's melodramatic IG stories without a second thought, because I realized neither of them were my future, they were both chapters in a book that needed to end, and I wasn't about to keep rereading old pages, so I focused on me, on Max, on grinding at work, staying late, picking up projects I used to avoid just to keep my mind busy, and it paid off, because out of nowhere I got tapped for a promotion, a position in Los Angeles I never thought I'd land, and when the email hit my inbox I swear I felt that spark I'd been missing for months, maybe years, reminder that my story didn't begin or end with Emily or Sarah, that I had my own arc outside of their drama, so I packed up, signed a lease in Santa Monica, and started fresh, just me and Max, new city, new apartment, new routine, and the freedom tasted better than any rebound romance could have, because for once I wasn't chasing or being chased, I was just living. And it felt damn good, but of course the past has a way of sneaking back, and it did, because the night before I left San Diego Emily showed up at my door, no makeup, hoodie, eyes swollen like she'd been crying for days, and she said she just wanted closure, and for a second I almost let her in, almost gave her the satisfaction of another round of explanations and tears, but then Max barked, snapped me out of it, and I told her, closure isn't something you get from me, it's something you find yourself. And I closed the door, not cruel, just final, and I knew in that moment I'd never look back again. And as for Sarah, she went nuclear on socials after the bar incident, blasting me, painting me as the villain, but the funny thing about the internet is people move on quick, and within a few weeks she had new photos with a new guy, new captions about leveling up, and I wasn't mad, I wasn't jealous, I just felt relief, like the chapter finally wrote itself to a close. And in LA I didn't chase new love, I didn't download the apps or hit the bars looking for validation, I just worked, explored, took Max to the beach, built a life that was mine, and the peace was addictive, so much that when opportunities to date again popped up, I didn't rush, I let things unfold slow, because I wasn't about to repeat old mistakes, and maybe that's the real lesson here, that dignity and self-respect matter more than holding on to someone who makes you question your worth, that sometimes walking away, even if it looks cold, is the bravest thing you can do, because you're not just leaving them, you're choosing you, and I know people still whisper, still bring up that bar night when they see me, still tag me in memes about messy breakups, but I don't care, because I lived it, I survived it, I came out the other side with scars, yeah, but also with clarity, and if you ask me now if I regret any of it, seat, the fight, the beer toss, the drama, I'll tell you no, because every bad choice taught me something. Every flameout pushed me closer to who I actually want to be, and maybe that's not the neat happy ending people expect, no wedding bells, no perfect soulmate, no Hollywood bow tied on top, but it's real, it's honest, and it's mine, and maybe one day down the road I'll meet someone who fits into this new version of me, someone who doesn't test me or try to own me, someone who just walks beside me, but if not I'll still be good, because I know now I'm enough on my own. And that's the part one want you to take from this story if you're reading it. Like some social media soap opera, don't let anyone make you feel like you're an option when you know damn well you're the prize, don't beg for respect, don't fight to sit in a seat that should have been yours without question, choose yourself first, and everything else falls into place. And with that said, I'm closing this chapter, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with gratitude, because even though Emily broke me and Sarah tested me, they both forced me to grow. And that growth is priceless, so yeah, that's the end of this messy saga. Thanks for tuning in like it was Netflix, but the credits are rolling, and I've got a new life to live, and trust me, it's just getting started.